Hey, good morning, everybody, and Kraig, mostly good morning to you. I appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today, and I, again, I know you know this. This particular newsletter and this publication we're putting out is a lot about year-end planning, and as you know, we take that consultative approach really serious with our clients, both at the sponsor level and at the participant level. But one thing we do not pretend to be is true financial planners. It's a completely different skill set. And you're somebody over the years we've sent clients over to because, in my opinion, you do a great job of connecting the financial planning concepts with a lot of tax strategy, which of course very similar to the way we approach a lot of our consulting. So, A, good morning.
Morning.
And B, I notice I talk right over your good morning. And B, if it's appropriate, I'd love to hear what are some of the kind of timely topics that you're talking to your clients about as you folks prepare for year end.
Sure. I think when people hear year end, one of the most common topics is tax planning. I always like to say that tax planning takes place between October and December, and scorecard reporting, which is tax preparation, takes place sometime the spring following. So this is a busy time of year for us. And under the guise of tax planning, there's three topics that I'm prepared to talk about today. The first of which I think is the most timely is the concept of bunching itemized deductions. We'll talk a little bit about how the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, also known as the Trump tax cuts, raised standard deductions to such a high level that many people don't itemize anymore. And those things that we thought used to be deductible really aren't deductible because you're not itemizing. So we're going to talk about a strategy called bunching of itemized deductions and how that might allow you and your listeners to get more tax deduction than they might otherwise get if they didn't do bunching. The other topic is it's obviously in the headlines that the markets have done so well. Appreciated stock. If somebody owns Amazon or Apple or any of those high flyers that have appreciated significantly, even in the last year or two, I'd like to talk a little bit about the donation of in-kind appreciated assets, donating stock in kind to charity, avoiding the capital gain while getting a full deduction for the market value of the stock on the date that it's donated. And I want to repeat, not selling the stock and donating the cash, donating the stock in kind. And then finally, a topic that can be controversial. We're not going to get into politics on this, but I do think it's timely to talk about Roth conversions. You'll do a pretty good job of distinguishing between an IRA Roth conversion versus a qualified plan Roth concept, be it a backdoor. We're going to talk about pure vanilla IRA conversions to Roth IRAs.
Yeah, that's perfect. And you're right. A lot of these topics and thoughts kind of do transcend both sides as we're always trying to make sure that we're being smart on the plan design side, on our world. But of all of those topics, and they all sound great, it sounded like, if I heard you correct, bunching is probably the one that you put at the top of the list that you're going to be reviewing with your clients going into the end of 2021. So if you don't mind, can you get in a little bit more detail on what exactly bunching is and means to the folks listening?
Sure. As I said earlier, and if you want to pull up our page one of our first slide, the Trump tax cuts that went into effect in 2018, they were actually legislated in 2017, but went into effect in 2018. They effectively doubled the size of the standard deduction. So what you're looking at on the screen right now is the list of standard deductions for single filers, head of households, those are single parents who are raising kids, for example, and married tax filers. And the other thing that this sheet shows is what your standard deduction would be if you're under 65 or if you're older than 65. And Steve, today I'll use a generic example of a married couple, and what we're going to focus on is that upper right-hand corner, which is $25,100. $25,100 is the standard deduction for married couples for tax year 2021. And what I thought we could do is use a generic example of what somebody's taxes might look like. And if you want to go to slide 2, what I've prepared here is a copy of Schedule A, which is the itemized deduction schedule on your tax return. Now, some people may look at their tax return and they don't have a Schedule A. And the reason they don't have a Schedule A is they didn't have enough itemized deductions. There was no need to do it. The tax software or the tax preparer may have prepared it, but it's not part of the return because they're not itemizing. And what I've done in this example is I've used a pretty typical middle America, if you will, household that has $10,000 of state and local tax deductions. One of the disadvantages of the Trump tax cuts is whether your taxes were $10,000 or whether they were $150,000, what is known as SALT, state and local tax deduction, is capped at $10,000. That's why I put $10,000 in that first line. The second line I just called mortgage interest or home equity loan interest. I called that $5,000. And in this example, I assumed that this married couple was making $10,000 in charitable donations. And when you add all those up, they add up to $25,000. And what you'll see at the very bottom of the screen is what we just talked about, the standard deduction of $25,100. So in this example, it's pretty much a wash. That client gets no benefit of itemizing because the standard deduction is $25,100. Their itemized deductions were $25,000. They get it's a wash. There's really no advantage. And what I think kind of gets people is, you know, they made $10,000 donations to charity in this example. Right. They're really not able to deduct it because they don't get any benefit over and above what the standard deduction would do. So what I'm going to talk about under the guise of charitables is the idea of bunching deductions in what I'll call an every other year cycle. Some people will do every third year. Some people will do, you know, like an odd year, they'll itemize, the even year they won't. So if you want to go to the next slide, I want to give you an example of what people could do before the end of this year. Of course, they have to have the cash to do it, but as you can see here, same client scenario, but here's the difference. If you look at the charitable deductions, we've doubled it up. Effectively, what we've done is said, okay, we're going to make our what is typically a year-end 2021 charitable deduction, but we're going to front load 2022. So what we've effectively done for tax year 2021 is we have made $20,000 of charitable deductions. We've simply done 2 years at the same time. And when you go to the bottom line, you'll see that now the itemized deductions are $35,000, almost $10,000 more than the standard deduction. So here's an example where you're going to get $10,000 of additional tax deduction by stacking or bunching or whatever term you want to use itemized deductions into the same year. I didn't illustrate it in this example, but there's other ways that you can bunch. You know, some people who might have major medical deductions, those are a little bit more difficult to deduct. They may jam a bunch of medical procedures into any one tax year so that they could bulk up on those deductions in a tax year as well. I'm using charitable because that's probably the most common way that people will bunch. So again, remember the first, if you want to go back to the prior slide for a second, in the prior slide, the client had no benefit to itemizing, and go ahead and skip to the next one. And instead of doing 1 year at a time, we're doing the every other year strategy. The client gets an additional $10,000 of deductions over and above the standard deduction amount. Now, this is 2021. If you go to the next slide, and even though it says 2021, let's assume we're in tax year 2022. Now we're going to take the year off. And as you'll see, we take the year off. We have 0 charitable deductions because this is our off year. This is our non-bunch year. And what you see at the bottom is only $15,000 of itemized deductions. Well, of course, you'll use the $25,100 standard deduction. So what have you accomplished here? By simply doing the charitables in 1 year in an every other year cycle, the taxpayer has been afforded the ability to deduct an additional $10,000 that they would not have been able to deduct if they were doing their every year consistent cycle of donating to charity.
Yeah, that's amazing. And just for the record, I know there's a lot of really smart people who are our clients and follow this stuff. I consider myself mildly intelligent. I give an annual donation that's part of a longer commitment to a school system that we have a relationship with, and am doing this completely, I think, the wrong way. So I can say there's at least one business owner who learned something from even your first few minutes here, Kraig. So that's great.
Sure. The other thing I would tell you, Steve, is I made mention of this earlier. I've got some clients that will do an every 4 year strategy so that they're itemizing 1 year and taking a couple years off and then itemizing again. The concept is bunch your deductions into a year where they're going to make a considerable impact on your taxes. And by all means, do it in a year that you might get a big bonus or you exercise stock options, or a year where there might be a tax spike is a great year to start the concept of bunching.
Right. That makes sense. And it could be completely unrelated, but is this thought related at all, Kraig, to the idea of the appreciated stock that you referred to at the outset?
Actually, they can work real well in tandem. When you look, it may be small for the viewers here, but I simply, in the charitable category, slid to the far right and was plugging in numbers for total charitable deductions. But if somebody were to take a closer look at Schedule A, there's two pieces. There's non-cash donations. The most common non-cash for most taxpayers are the donations you make to Goodwill or Salvation Army. Those are typical non-cash donations. And then there's cash donations. But Steve, that's exactly right. If you go to the next slide, I've got an example of how appreciated stock donations can, especially in a bunching type year, can really impact one's taxes. And what I've used here is Apple. We've all heard of Apple. Most of us have iPhones, iPads, and all that stuff. Well, in 2017, Apple stock was $30 a share. So what I've used here is an example of somebody that may have purchased 300 shares of Apple back in 2017. And as of yesterday, Apple was roughly about $140 a share. So here we are with an original investment of $9,000 and the stock's worth $42.9. Well, if the client were to sell the stock, basically the proceeds are $42,900. You've got a gain of $33,000. For the purpose of this illustration, I think I've been too nice from a tax standpoint. I've used the lower capital gains rate of 15%. Many people watching today may be in the 20% bracket. I'm in Illinois right now. Our tax rate is 4.95. I just used 5% as a proxy for state income tax. That's way too nice for the West and the East Coast, but nonetheless, 5% is the placeholder here. And in this example, for somebody who's in the 5% state bracket and is not impacted by that next nasty item, the 3.80 is known as the ACA, the Affordable Health Care Act investment surtax, otherwise known as the Obamacare surtax. There can be a lot of taxes on capital gains, some obvious, some not so obvious. But in this example, the total capital gain would be $6,780 if the person were to sell the stock. Now, if that same person were to donate the stock in kind means you're giving the stock itself. You're changing the registration from John and Jane Doe to ABC Charity. If you donate the stock in kind, this client would receive a full market value deduction of the stock. So in this case, it'd be a $42,900 donation. There's a couple of quick caveats to that. Number one, donated stock, you must hold it for 1 year. I did not put that in the little fine print here, but you have to have owned it for 1 year before you can donate it for this strategy to work. And number two, the value of your non-cash donations, your appreciated donations, be it stock, real estate, or any other asset that's appreciated, is limited to 30% of your adjusted gross income. So if this taxpayer had an adjusted gross income of $100,000, that taxpayer would be limited to $30,000 of appreciated stock deduction. They could do cash on top of that, but the stock donation would be limited to $30,000, and then whatever is left over carries forward 5 years. So just a couple of quick caveats to that. For people who have high AGIs, that's usually not an issue, but if somebody's retired and they have a lower AGI, it could come into play. So Steve, you asked, you kind of tied this into the bunching strategy. What a wonderful time as we sit here in mid-October of 2021 with the markets at or darn near the highest they've ever been to consider the bunching strategy and maybe take it a step further in considering donating some stock you've made significant profits on as part of your bunching strategy, avoiding the capital gains tax, itemizing, getting a big deduction. That's the way we do planning. We like to tie a lot of these concepts together.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And like you said, I think really timely with where the market is, and particularly as we've seen a lot of tech companies really run. And I know that's just something that's affected a lot of our different clients because we get questions about it. So again, great to tie that into a tax strategy more than just an investment discussion. And I guess my last thing, Kraig, and I know we're getting a little tight on time here, but I think this is extremely timely too. This year, due to some media coverage, we've gotten a massive increase in inquiries for people to do the backdoor, mega Roth IRAs, or even Roth conversions in their qualified plans. And while those are all viable options, there's a lot of complexities, and it doesn't really work as well as it's often suggested in the qualified plan side due to some DOL technicalities. Not the purpose of today's conversation, but what it did lead me to is, again, the third item you mentioned at the beginning here, which is Roth conversions. And my point is, I think it is a better and more timely conversation to have there, or at least I should say it's more universally applicable to have on the individual side, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think that you're exactly right. And I said earlier, we were going to talk about Roth conversions under the guise of vanilla Roth conversions. You have an IRA, you're going to convert it to a Roth. And there used to be a tax law that said if your adjusted gross income exceeded $100,000, you could not do a Roth conversion. That's gone away. That went away, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. So anybody, regardless of income, can do a Roth conversion. And it can be a controversial topic. The sweet spot is if you can convert at a lower rate today than what your rate would be in the future, that's a mathematical win. So I'm not going to sit here and give you my opinion on which way politics is going to go with tax law. I'm going to stick to some facts. So if you want to go to the next slide, here are the facts if Washington gets nothing done. I think there's a lot of us who think Washington won't get anything done, but if they get nothing done, what you're looking at here is the difference between the 2017 tax rates and the 2018 tax rates. So this is what changed with the Trump tax cuts. I know it's a little bit small on the screen for some viewers, but you can see that the 10% bracket stayed the same. What used to be the 15% bracket fell to 12. What used to be the 25 bracket fell to 22. What used to be the 28 bracket fell to 24. Tax rates were lowered by the Trump tax cuts. And I think it's important that everybody watching today understand that if nothing else happens in Congress, what you see on the 2017 side of the ledger, which of course will be adjusted for indexing, is coming back in 2026. These tax rates, 2018 and beyond, are set to sunset after 2025. If nothing else happens, tax rates are going up. There's nothing politically charged about that statement. That is a fact. So if rates are going to go up, I personally think they'll go up before 2026, but whether they go up this year, next year, or in 2026, sounds like you've got a pretty good argument for a conversion arbitrage. Rates are going to be going up. Why not do it? There's state tax considerations as well. In Illinois, where I reside, which is not a very well-run state, one of the last bastions of tax advantages is Illinois does not tax retirement distributions, pensions, 401ks, IRAs, and a Roth IRA is a 1099-R IRA distribution. So it's taxed as an IRA distribution, and at least where we live in Illinois, that is not taxed. So that could be an arbitrage opportunity. If you're a resident of Florida or Texas or any of those other states that don't tax state income, and you might want to move closer to kids or grandkids or whatever the case might be, that could be another case for it. The last piece I wanted to talk about, Steve, is a stealth reason why people might want to consider IRA conversions. If you go to the next slide, I'm going to discuss Medicare Part B briefly. You and I, we're still a few years from 65, but it's getting closer and closer for us all. And on this slide, you may want to enlarge it a little bit because it's tough to see, are the tax bands for Medicare Part B deductions. Now, for most people who aren't part of people who participate in Social Security and receive Social Security checks, their Medicare Part B premium comes right out of their Social Security check. So I'm going to take a look at the top line. If somebody has an adjusted gross income of less than $176,000, their Medicare Part B premium per person, per husband, per wife, per taxpayer is $148.50. As your AGI goes up, so too does the amount of the deduction for Medicare Part B. You and I refer to this as means testing. If you have more means, you pay more. I call it a stealth tax. tax. Some people call it means testing. I think it's both, whatever the case might be. And look what happens as you start going up in AGI. Well, what causes AGI to go up for many retired people? Required minimum distributions from IRAs. If you've implemented a Roth conversion strategy, maybe you can whittle those RMDs down, those required distributions down, so they don't impact your cost of Medicare Part B. And the last point I want to make is, we've been talking about married couple as the proxy for many of our discussions today. I want the viewers to take a good look at the left-hand column. The left-hand column is individual taxpayers' bands for the Medicare Part B premium. And remember, if a joint tax filer is under $176,000, they pay the least amount for Medicare Part B. But look what happens to somebody who's newly widowed. If you go down to that $165,000 to $500,000 AGI band for an individual filer, and you slide to the right, insult to injury, if somebody loses a spouse, their Medicare Part B premium could go from $148.50 to $475.20 per month. And I would note that what you have here is Medicare Part B. Prescription Medicare Part D, as in David, that also goes up by what's called the IRMA, the Income Related Monthly Adjustment Amount. So there's a lot of reasons why a Roth conversion, both obvious and not obvious, should be considered.
That's great. I know we've taken about 20 minutes here, and I think you've had some amazing ideas. It's, again, I know a lot of my clients and the people who listen to these newsletters and some of our webinars have heard me say this a zillion times. I think I'm pretty good at what I do, but investments is such a specialized, area. And as I say, we're kind of the radiologists where we really focused on the qualified plan, and then you need an oncologist at times, and you need a, cardiovascular, all these other specialists. And again, I think you do a great job of taking that investment personal discussion and so intertwining it with tax discussion, because it really is a discussion. And I feel like when people often come for my 2-cent opinion, just because I have some of those similar degrees and licenses, I'm really quick to say, to do it right, you really need to connect those things and again, speak to somebody like yourself. So to our clients, I hope you guys are having those conversations with the right people. If you do want to have more conversations with Kraig, I'll just give the website if that's okay, Kraig, or
Sure.
You can feel free to do it yourself, right? krmfinancial.com.
That's it.
All right. Or of course, you can go through me or your RSG relationship team. We have a great partnership with Kraig and the folks over at KRM. So that's a lot of information in a short period of time. But the big thing it sounds like is make sure that you're having that planning discussion in these next 2 months. So extremely timely. And so again, Kraig, any final thoughts? Let me know.
I think we hit on everything, and I wish everybody a happy end of the year and good planning.
All right. Thanks as always, buddy. And for everybody else out there, I hope this was as helpful for you as it was for me. I got to go talk to my wife. All right. Take care. Thanks, man.
Bye.